Welcome to Arts and Music. I'm your host, Victor Janflone. Today on Arts and Music, I'm pleased to bring you Lisa Miles, musician, author, and activist.
Lisa, when did you know you were on a creative path?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Creative path, knowing probably would be post-college. I've been playing the violin since the age of 10 in school orchestras, and then through college started in with playing professionally with a bunch of symphonies. But not until post-college, right after college, coming back to Pittsburgh, my hometown, and starting to play in bands. First of all, finding the underground band scene, the post-punk scene, I guess it was, in the late 80s. But also being asked to lay tracks down on the violin for friends' bands, and then playing in the Farrell family, and starting to get the desire to write original music of my own.
So tell us about the Farrell family.
Sure. The Farrell family was the first band I was sort of asked to majorly be a part of. It happened at Chiefs one night, sitting across from Matt Marcus with a cellist friend who also played classical like I, but was a part of the underground scene. And it was a great band that we played mostly acoustic, but sometimes great electric gigs at the Electric Banana, plugged in. It was sort of folk punk. It definitely was punk in spirit, and there were just a lot of great tunes on unconventional instruments such as banjo, violin, mandolin, certainly guitar still, and drums put together, and just playing wild covers like Motorhead to Hank Williams.
So Motorhead, you were playing
and originals.
With banjo?
I played violin on Motorhead.
Well, I'm saying as far as
yeah, oh, absolutely.
There,
well, I can't remember if Motorhead, and we did everything from Dancing Days to all kinds of stuff, but really good originals, and just interspersed with some very appropriate covers.
So what do you prefer? Do you prefer playing acoustic or electric?
Electric's a lot of fun. Certainly you get to play with the tricks, the pedals, and the other things. And I have a beautiful new Zeta instrument. It's not so new anymore, but it's an electric violin, and it gets some great sound when you can get everything working right. But that's the problem with electrics. You always have to mess with lugging everything, certainly, and just getting everything squared away. And I love, instead, I'd have to say my preference is almost to play on my beautiful old master violin and to play it rockin', because people don't expect that. They think that acoustic instruments, especially in the classical string family, can't rock out, and you can, and especially with beautiful, rich, deep, spirited chords. And so I kind of like playing acoustically, but the necessity and the flair and glam is to play it with the Zeta violin when I do gigs, often.
Have you played for symphonies?
Absolutely, yeah. In fact, that's when I first started making money as a violinist. It was in very late high school, doing some chamber music work, but then in college, starting to play with the Youngstown Symphony and a slew of others in Western Pennsylvania, to the point where I was just gigging almost every other night at symphonic rehearsals or concerts, and then coming home and going straight to the Banana to play with the Farrells, or to go to Chiefs and talk about the next gig with, for example, I was in a band called Blacklight Discipline with Rich Schnapp and some of the other folks from the Cynics of years back. And so it was a nice blend for me of the classical punk, the symphonic, and the playing in bands, and getting the sense that I could find my own voice as a musician.
Your CD is named Nalada.
Yep.
How does the name reflect to the works on the CD?
It certainly portends the span of stuff that I do, which tends to be either fast little 3-minute numbers that are a little more spirited and punk in flavor, to the more atmospheric change of mood, the atmospheric, layered, woven, textured stuff that I do at the other end of the spectrum. So it's sort of even though it's named for the one piece that was originally Contemplation, which is contemplation of mood, for a performance piece of mine called Presence, it happens to be a nice reflection of all of the pieces, I think, on the CD, change of mood.
The feeling I got from the CD was a gypsy kind of feel. Can you relate to that?
You know, certainly in the spirit of what that word means. But a lot of people have mentioned, and I certainly sense it, that some of my works, those longer pieces that are woven and textural and layered, that they're Eastern sounding. So I either have, and I use a lot of dissonance. I don't really like bright sounding stuff. I love reggae, of course, and that's maybe the brightest I like in terms of major chords, in the sense of, I mean, when I write original stuff, I write in dark dissonance and more ambient sounds when I'm especially doing these gypsy-like pieces or the Eastern sounding pieces, not intending them to come out that way. Even my more rockin' numbers, though, more punk-like rock tradition numbers, they tend to not use the major chord too much. So the gypsy certainly fits the overall background, I think.
The medieval love song and garden haunt.
Yeah.
A reason for the quick transition on the CD.
That piece, those two pieces were put together from the East End event, a really cool, funky little event, art event that happened in Pittsburgh for many, many years in the 90s, maybe even beyond. But I was asked to play in the garden of, I think it was James Shipman's garden. He's a great sculptor. And also I was doing a lot of work with and other sculptors and artists there, and I do a lot of improvisational, as I mentioned earlier, atmospheric or nature. I even mentioned I was planted in a garden. I had my amp and my electronics, and I was allowed to improvise. And I came up with a couple templates of pieces that later I remembered, and I probably recorded them as well at the time, and transformed them into that little piece. And that's just what they were. They were abruptly changing. And so I put them together on the CD as such.
What is cross-disciplinary creative work?
Cross-disciplinary creative work is creative work that spans lots of disciplines or different genres. And for me, it really fits because I do work as a writer and as a musician, but I also, as a musician, write stuff for dancers, have written for dancers and for theater, even for visual artists, painting, actually improvising while they paint. So it's mixing up the mediums of art.
You're in a select few to have help in your creative endeavors through the Joe Strummer Foundation. For those who don't know, who is Joe Strummer?
Joe Strummer, The Clash, probably the very, very talented, guy who was
he's
in it.
He's deceased now, right?
He definitely is, yeah, sadly, 2002, I think it was. Short life, I think it was at age 50. I think it was 1950 to 2002. But he was the front man for the Clash. He was the singer-songwriter, half songwriter, and guitarist, and just the embodiment of that whole punk scene, but political punk too. The idea that it can really kick in sound, but also have good message. He was for the everyman, essentially.
And what does this foundation do?
They're based out of the UK, and came to my attention from my husband Jan. He had mentioned that he saw that there was a foundation called Strummerville, the Joe Strummer Foundation for New Music, and they were relatively new at the time, back when I explored the possibility of getting some help for my CD, to get some support. And they basically give support to those that are writing new original work, and they look at the whole span of original voicing.
So the foundation helped with the release of Nella, then?
It did. Absolutely did.
You are an author.
I am, yeah.
And one of your books is entitled The Life and Art of Esther Phillips. And tell us about Esther Phillips, please.
Sure. The full title of that book is This Fantastic Struggle, The Life and Art of Esther Phillips. And it was part of what helped me to find that I wanted to do creative work back in the earliest of the 90s, when I stumbled upon a little bit about her life, which was very little, at a posthumous show of her work at the Carson Street Gallery in Pittsburgh. She was a painter who was institutionalized, obviously, for a period, because some of those paintings that were on the wall of the gallery that people didn't know much about, except to see that they were of a day room, of an institution, apparently. So I got the bug to go over to Carnegie Library and start to explore the archives, and I found some great stuff from the 1930s that were written about her reviews of that time before she went to Greenwich Village. And I just became fascinated and compelled to research her life, and took about 11 years going to New York and the Archives of American Art and talking to aging bohemians, is the way one of my reviewers put it. It was a blast. It was a lot of work, but it was fun. And it was a labor of love over about 11 years. Published the book in 2002. And it's not just her biography of a great woman artist, but it's really a cultural essay on the struggle that all artists face in trying to make a living.
So has anybody else written any book about Esther, or are you the only person who's ever?
I brought her to the attention of the art world and of the world, essentially, in the sense of her work deserved recognition, and her life, her struggle as an embodiment of other artists.
Now, was her work, like you said, she was institutionalized? Mm-hmm. Was it? Did she do most of her work before that, or did she do it while she was in?
She did it while she was in, and before and after. While she was in the institution, a librarian befriended her, found out she was writing colorful, wild stories about Greenwich Village, and said, "How do you know about the village?" She said, "Well, I'm an artist." And so with that, they brought over some famous artist who was still living, at least up until a few years ago, in his 90s, Will Barnett, an abstract expressionist. She knew all the abstract expressionists, and he brought her easel and paints. They did, and he watched and helped her to essentially just find herself again as an artist. She was much ahead of her time, even though there was a lot going on with the modern and abstraction. She was even flirting with that before the abstract expressionists were. Of course, there's a ton of underground artists that just aren't known about. But she was part of that scene, one of the many, many, many that weren't discovered, basically.
Any other books you've published?
Yeah, in 2007, I wrote about the North Side, my home, called Resurrecting Allegheny City, with the old name of the North Side of Pittsburgh.
Which is with the, isn't the stop here? Is that Allegheny, the new stop on the subway?
They probably call it Allegheny Station, I would imagine. Yeah, I'm not too familiar.
Down this way more.
But Allegheny City was all of the 13 or so North Side neighborhoods that we have. I mean, everything from Spring Hill to Perry Hilltop to the darling Mexican War streets in North Shore. I say that only because so many areas of the North Side are given money and given support, and others are neglected, and that needs to be much more integrated. It was great fun doing that book, though, because I learned a lot more about my own neighborhood, my own house, and just great houses on the North Side.
Mm-hmm. I see you have an interest in the Occupy movement.
Yeah.
Did you do anything with the Occupy movement? Was that just here in Pittsburgh? Or?
Sure, yeah. Well, actually, it started with, I began writing some essays and articles as offshoots of my book, essentially, or my ideas of art and work, that artists are workers. And a young kid from Philadelphia found one of those and put them up on his site, the David and Goliath Project, which was a precursor to the Occupy movement. In fact, he told me in July or June of the year before they happened, in July and then September, essentially last year, that of the murmurings of it going on. And he said, "I'd like to post your essay," and I said, "Gladly." And then I was shocked to see it really fully blossom into the Occupy Wall Street movement, his affiliation with these guys from the Adbusters campaign. And so, Jan and I went down in Pittsburgh, down to the Occupy site. We didn't camp out, but we were there a lot, as much as we could, to bring food and support and to try to become camaraderie and to continue to get their message out. It's an important one.
And with the Occupy movement, though, do you think it's still having any effect at the moment, or is it kind of like just a stagnant kind of situation?
It's in a new place for sure. Certainly, the encampments were one thing, but what they've done to really spur some unions even that weren't fully active, even in Pittsburgh, for example, with the Governor Corbett controversy, with the Arts and Opera Award. There's just been a lot of union...
So refresh people on that.
Sure.
The Corbett thing.
The Pittsburgh Opera gave him an award that he shouldn't have been given, he and his wife, essentially, for being patrons of the arts. And
why are they not...
You're grilling me on I'm not real versed on fully versed. I mean, I know enough to know that basically he's been taking money away from arts and education programs. I mean, that's in a nutshell.
Right.
And the teachers' unions got really so enraged, not that they weren't active before, the teachers' unions, but they almost encamped down at the Strip District, at the headquarters of the Pittsburgh Opera. And that was that and many, many other things, especially in a more global or national sense with Occupy Wall Street, has made some changes. And I know that the Occupy movement will transform and regenerate in new and different ways. Some of those changes are occurring, with the banks and credit card fees and people standing up and realizing they can protest and the like. like, and not having that courage before. But when you have a bunch of young punk kids who have given me and Jan hope that that there is some sense of people not just being behind their gadgets anymore in this day and age, but actually getting out and doing something. It's important, I think, that you can see young kids having some fire, kind of like the early punk scene.
Where do you see music and the arts going? And do you feel with this digital distribution, is that taking away like having a real product? Because I know that I've talked to people in the business and they want to just get everything to be digital. Yeah. And I still believe in the product. Yeah.
Well, the way I could best answer that maybe is to look at it in a personal sense. I mean, I've done a lot of soul searching and questioning even since 2002, just a mere 10 years since my first book came out, and that's an art book that has beautiful art gallery color plates in the middle. That's a physical product that you're proud of and that is beautiful, and it's an art product in itself. But it's expensive. It's very expensive to put out a book like that and to have it reprinted. I'll continue to reprint as long as there are sales, and there continue to be. I'm already in another version of a reprint for that book now. But books, physical books and physical products for music are expensive, especially the books, the print. And I just think it's interesting to try to evolve, and I've been starting to try to do that with my considerations of the next books out there for me to go into electronic as well, certainly, not to just have the physical product, and maybe get some of these older titles also to the ebooks out there.
And do you consider yourself an activist? And what is your biggest cause you feel as being an activist?
Well, we talked about the Occupy movement, and certainly, I'm certainly, that I'm of the punk rock spirit. That I think that people should, if there's injustice, that people should stand up and do whatever they need to do to make noise, to make music, to make art, and to write and speak about that and organize people. I'm a big union person. I've written a lot on the union stagehands, IATSE Local 3 in Pittsburgh, because of the ridiculousness that the art establishment is also there's a 1% in the art establishment, and that's the Occupy movement lingo there, of course. The main thing is that goes back, that's not a new thing for me. That goes back to my work on This Fantastic Struggle, because that book talked about the fact that artists are workers, and society hasn't wanted to see them as such. But ironically, even within the art world, there's that 1%, the movers and shakers, that is the ones, not the movers and shakers, but the ones with the money are controlling the artists. And so my next book is, if I may put out, is called Creative Folly, and it talks about, it's in the works, it's been in the works for some time, but it talks about that inequality in the art world, that artists even have a hard time of it with grantors and funders and the like, getting support. And I've got great ideas for change for that. And that doesn't come just from me and my being a professional artist for 25 plus years, but from friends, being among a community of artists and knowing, not just in Pittsburgh, but in New York City and the like, and knowing how change should and could happen.
Now, for this latest book you just mentioned,
yep.
Is it going to be hardback? You're going to try to put it out that way, or are you just going to put it out digitally?
I'll never do hardback. All my books have been paperback. I don't know. I don't even have an aesthetic desire for hardback books. I think they're just a little bit too, unless you're doing something really artful and coffee table. With looking at old. I recently purchased an old master violin book from overseas in Europe, basically. But paperback has always been my thing, and I certainly will, though, also put it out electronically this time, and that's where the kids are pushing me to do the electronic now, the movement.
And any upcoming performances to note? I know you said something to me about New York City, so...
Yeah, I had a couple interesting ones with the release of Nalada. One was at Cedars in Youngstown, Ohio, which is like the Electric Banana punk club of Youngstown. That was pretty cool, sponsored by Youngstown State not too long ago. And now I just recently got an invite to play the Cornelia Street Cafe in New York City. And it's a wild little place that does a lot of jazz and spoken word and new music, cross-disciplinary stuff.
Do you feel there's a modern kind of like beatnik movement at all?
I don't really have any interest in in the hippie beatnik movement. I've always been more of the punk scene, and that's kind of antithetical. I mean, they cross, of course, but there probably is. I'm sure there is. I've never been sorry to say, but I've never been a Dead fan. But I've been, I'm into that punk spirit and that more, not the dropping out so much and getting mellow, but being feisty and having fire and passion, and that's where I see the distinction a little bit between the two.
I only mentioned that because you were talking about that place in New York and the poetry and the different types of...
Right. It all blends together. I mean, we all have our personal preferences, but it does blend together. That liberal left scene, hey, that's who I am.
Where can people purchase your CDs, books, and the like?
Sure. My website, www.lisamilesviolin.com. You can find out info on my work and upcoming gigs. And you can certainly purchase my books there. You can get my music on iTunes and Amazon.com and every other electronic outlet for CDs, basically.
Well, with that, I think it wraps it up with Lisa Miles. I want to thank you, Lisa, for being on the show.
Thank you so much, Victor.
And thank you all for watching.